Yeah.
I've told them yeah.
Should be an alternate officer recommendation, and we should have picked it up.
Yes.
It's alright, I'm pressing. Who is moving it?
Yeah,
Did you print out?
you're away at the right time.
I just ran out the cat upstairs and I sprained my ankle to see whether he was in the office.
And I've got that alternate.
That's this one, is that?
Don't use that one.
It's the same anyway.
Use that one. That's just in case. That's the petition. I've got those for an alternate officer recommendation. That one. And also for the contract, something to do with it.
Lonely tonight.
Can I start?
I don't have any of my buddies.
Are you on? Girls, are you on?
Good. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's council meeting. To begin with, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we are gathered here this evening, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and future, and to welcome all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who may be with us here this evening. Membership this evening is not as listed in the agenda, so Councillor Lawrence and Councillor McCarthy are both on an approved leave of absence, and so are not members of the council meeting this evening, and our apologies. We also have apologies from Councillor Messina. Item 3 is disclosure of conflicts of interest. Are there any disclosures? Councillor Amir.
I'd like to declare indirect financial interest for item 8.1.
Thank you, Councillor Amir. Item 4 is confirmation of the minutes of council meeting from the 2nd of July 2018. That's moved by Councillor Amir, seconded by Councillor Newton. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Item 5 is question and submission time. I'll go to the question that we received prior to the meeting first. So the question is from Anne Laver from Northcote. If you'd just like to come up to the lectern here.
Evening, Mayor and Councillors. It's Anne Laver from Reed Street, Northcote. I'd like to ask my first question, which is, why are there no monies set aside in the budget for waste management, and has a new recycling contract been awarded, please?
Okay, so in response, thank you for your question. A total of $13.626 million net is included in the 18-19 council budget for council waste services. So this is an operating expense, not a capital expense, capital works. So on page 10 of the budget papers, it has that information included. There is also an additional $10,000 in the budget to conduct a full review of the waste strategy, which is an addition to that. $100,000, did I not say that? Oh, $100,000, sorry.
The waste strategy, did you?
The waste strategy review, yep. In relation to the recycling contracts, thank you for your ongoing interest in this one. Council has recently exercised the contract option to extend our current recycling services, which will expire in 2020, which is a great result, which will ensure that the ongoing collection for our community.
Is it to the same service provider, please?
Yes.
Can I ask that?
So we're exercising the contract extension that was within the current contract.
To SKM? Yes. Okay. All right. Can I put in my submission now and a statement now, or do you want me to wait later?
Do we have the list of submissions? Into which item is it for? Neither particular item. Just, okay, yep.
Yeah, so all right. I sent a submission question with a link for recycling tips, which I would ask if the council could please add to their website. It's okay. If they could do that, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, yep. So, so the material that the officers have said that the material that you provided is very valuable, and we've asked it to be considered as a part of the review into the waste strategy and the way that we continue to communicate with our community.
Thank you. The last thing I'd like to say is a statement. I am unsure if the pathway along the western side along Croxton's train station belongs to Darebin Council. I don't know if it does for sure, whether it belongs to Metro or Vic Roads. But I just wish to say thank you for finally installing a drain, because it's been flooding for about 20 years, so it's now fixed. So thank you.
Thank you for that. We received a second question for the meeting, but after the deadline. So there's a deadline to submit the question so that you receive a response on the night. So because we received it after the deadline, I'll read out the question, but we will take the question on notice and provide a response after the meeting. So the question is from Maria Paletti, who is the President of DARDA, and it's in relation to, or follow-up question from a question that she asked on the 17th of July 2017 regarding the VCAT compulsory conference for the Preston market. So her questions tonight, in follow-up to the questions that she asked last year, are what are the outcomes of that criminal investigation is the first question, and question two is, will Council now answer the two questions put and reassure the community that the leak did not come from a Council representative? So we thank Maria Paletti for her question, and that her question will be taken on notice and a written response will be provided to her. That's all the questions that we received. Are there any further questions from the gallery? No? Okay. Moving now to item 6, which is petitions. Councillor Rennie.
Yes, I'd like to move that this petition be accepted, noting that it will be discussed further at 9.1.
Okay. Yeah, so you'll have to read out the petition first.
The petition was originally addressed to Councillor McCarthy, who's not here tonight. Re Andrew Street, Northcote stormwater drainage. We, the undersigned residents of Andrew Street, Northcote, are requesting Council consider the allocation of funds in the next budget, or sooner if funds permit, for the construction of an underground stormwater drainage system and associated stormwater side entry pits running north-south in Andrew Street between Basting Street and Brook Street. In times of heavy rains, the 90 mm outlet pipes connecting to the curb and channel are inadequate to cope with the flow. Being at the lower end of Ruckers Hill, groundwater tends to exacerbate the effects of the reactive clay soil and is the cause of foundation movement to varying degrees in some residences. The northern length of Andrew Street between Bastings and Mitchell, and further north between Mitchell and Separation Street, has been serviced with an underground system. Similarly, all surrounding streets such as Brook Street, Waterloo Road, Derby Street, Clark Street, Basting Street and Mason Street have all been provided with underground drainage. Your consideration and support for this request would be appreciated. Yours sincerely, and the signatories are on the petition.
Okay. So
that counts that the petition be received and that the petition be dealt with in conjunction with the item 9.1 on tonight's agenda.
Okay, that's moved by Councillor Rennie. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Mear. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Are there any other petitions? No. Item 7, urgent business. Is there any urgent business? No urgent business. Item 8 is consideration of reports. 8.1, Solar Saver Special Charge Scheme Declaration. Councillor Mear.
I'd like to declare an indirect conflict for this item.
Yes.
I have an indirect financial conflict as my property is one of the properties listed in the papers.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Mear. We'll wait for you to leave the chamber. Okay. That's moved by Councillor Rennie and seconded by Councillor Williams. Councillor Rennie.
Thank you. I'm delighted to move the motion tonight that Council, having complied with the requirements of sections 163A, B and 223 of the Local Government Act, and otherwise according to the law declare a special charge under section 163 of the Act. I won't read out the full details of the special charge because they're on the screen, but essentially this is the mechanism via which we are able to pay upfront for many, many Darebin households to have solar panels on their roof. And what an outstanding outcome this is for our community. 477 properties will have solar panels on their roofs, adding 2,040 kilowatts of solar energy into our local grid, doubling council's solar panels through the previous scheme. I'd like to particularly note that low-income households have been prioritised in this scheme. And we have been provided with a list of all the properties that will have solar panels. And one thing that particularly struck me was that residents from all over Darebin are benefiting from this. pages of households in Reservoir, in Kingsbury, in Thornbury, in Fairfield, in Preston, all signing up. Even a couple of households in Coburg and Coburg North, which threw me for a little bit because I thought that Coburg and Coburg North were not in Darebin, and I had to look it up and discovered that there are actually a very small strip of houses from those suburbs that are actually in Darebin. So I think that's an outstanding outcome and testament to the work of staff within council who have put in a lot of hours making sure that our community knew about the scheme, that people's questions were answered and that people were able to sign up. I think it speaks volumes to how highly our community regards this opportunity and to council's general commitment to increasing renewable energy in our municipality. So let's get those systems on the roofs, and then we know that this is just the first of what will be many waves of households signing up, so that hopefully Darebin will really be not just a greener, bolder, more connected city, but a solar city, and that an increasingly large percentage of our energy will come. So this scheme effectively creates a special charge that enables those households through the rates to pay back the cost to council over up to 10 years. They can, of course, pay that earlier.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Councillor Williams.
This has been a wonderful initiative that council has been running for several years now. Previously, that we've had a number of 500 household who have taken participants that have taken part of this solar panels and that we've put on their homes. With the Solar Saver participants, they put an interest in. We go through that process and then we allocate the most appropriate people who need it. Now, this year, it's not only just going to low-income homes, but it's actually open to everyone. What this actually means is that households that previously weren't able to possibly put heaters on or the air conditioner on, and they would suffer in their own home, freeze, and they would put on extra clothing, but they weren't very comfortable in their own home. What this allows them to do is that council goes through the whole process, and that whole jargon of different types of panels and different watts and kilowatts, and breaks it down, and we do all that for them, and we look at which is the best one to go with, and we provide that with that information to them. And what this allows them to do, two ways, either paying back council as a lump sum or through instalments. So we actually do all the hard yards, and all they have to do is sit back, relax, and enjoy hopefully those winter nights where they can turn that heater on, or those really hot summer nights where they can have the air conditioner on, which I think is just marvellous. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'd just like to say a few words in relation to this. I think we could consider this project as one of the signature projects for the City of Darebin, and I note that many other councils are looking closely at Darebin and looking at the example that we have actually piloted and trialled, and it's proved to be a very successful initiative by the very fact that there's been such a big uptake. The other thing I also like to underline, and a point that's raised by Councillor Rennie, is the number of people that have taken up this initiative right across our community, from Alphington all the way across to Reservoir, which is really great to see. It hasn't been concentrated in any particular area of the city, and it's something that all residents have seen a need or a desire to actually take something up like this. As I mentioned, it's been previously piloted. What we're doing is actually putting into place something that we've trialled in a very effective way, and that our officers have been quite creative in terms of the way that they've put this project together, notwithstanding the enormity of the project that we have before us now. And just finally, I'd like to say that not only does the project save our residents money, also indirectly it saves the council, and also, as we know, it's a great contributor to the environment.
Thank you. Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Melissa. I'd really like to echo what Councillor Rennie and Councillor Williams have said. I just think this is a perfect example of something that's a real win-win for council and the community. We've got a huge community benefit here, and we can be leaders in this space where other councils and levels of government can follow. And what I really like about the Solar Savers program is it's equitable, so people don't have to pay a lump sum for solar panels straight away, and they can pay it back over 10 years, and it also leads to lower electricity prices, which is just amazing. I also think it's really important that this is now open to all residents, and we've worked to make sure that it can be available for renters as well. And I think from when we first implemented Solar Savers to now having a climate emergency framework across the whole of Darebin, I think it's something we can be really inspired by, and we hope to see it at other councils.
Thank you. Now that everyone's spoken, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Motion is carried. We'll just get Councillor Amir back into the room. And moving now to item 8.2, which is the Planning Scheme Amendment C161, Fairfield Village Consideration of Submissions. We have one person who's registered to make a submission to the council, so I'll call on Ellie Crambius. Yep, if you'd like to come up here to the lectern.
My name is Ellie Crambius and I am here to represent Floyd Victoria Propriety Limited, the owner of 86 Station Street, Fairfield. We object to the Planning Scheme Amendment C161. Our objection to the Darebin Planning Scheme Amendment C161 is based on the following three reasons. First, the report prepared by Heritage Intelligence is based on three themes: developing Fairfield's economy, peopling Fairfield, transport and communication. The report makes only historical reference to peopling Fairfield and developing the economy and does not analyse the impact of proposed changes in front of you today. Specifically, how will this planning amendment affect the economy of Fairfield and peopling Fairfield? Second, the setback and height limits. It appears that the setback of 4 metres on a first level and 8 metres above have been recommended without considering interface, commercial or residential, or providing evidence for this recommendation. Thirdly, the Heritage Intelligence report deduces that the street's significance is based on historical, social and aesthetic values. While accepting some historical value, it is difficult to accept the aesthetic value when there is so much variation on the street, while the social element has not been investigated. For the above three reasons, we believe this amendment should not be referred to the panel, but the council should further investigate the economic, peopling and aesthetic value of recommendations while reviewing the impact of setbacks.
Thank you very much for your submission. Are there any further submissions to this item? No? Okay, councillors. Moved by Councillor Rennie. Yep. Seconded by Councillor Amir. Councillor Rennie.
Thank you. I'd like to move that Council, having prepared and exhibited the amendment to the Darebin Planning Scheme, note those submissions that have been received, endorse the responses and endorse Amendment C161 as exhibited. The big part of this is that Council would request that the Minister of Planning appoint an independent panel under Part 8 of the Planning and Environment Act to consider submissions and authorise the Manager of City Futures to make any further changes to the amendment C161 that may be required, and advise all submitters of Councillor's resolution. That's a brief summary of what's up on the board for people who might not be able to see that. This is the next stage in what has been quite a long and meticulous process of determining how Fairfield should be developed, knowing that development will occur, and if it occurs in an unplanned way, the outcomes that the community and that the precinct will experience will be less desirable than if we have a plan around this precinct. I would like to thank all of those community members who took the opportunity to participate in the process, and particularly those who made a submission, and thank you particularly to Ellie for coming along tonight. There were some current themes in those submissions, and in particular people who raised questions about heritage on buildings that didn't appear to immediately have heritage value. And I think it's important to know that the way in which heritage is being considered in this precinct is very much as a precinct and maintaining the village feel in the area. Partly that's being achieved through some height limits, and partly through very carefully thought through setbacks. The area will change, but people in the area are very clear that the village feel is particularly important. And so keeping in mind that the submissions indicate that not everybody will be happy with the outcome, there were also some submissions that were favourable. And I think it's quite difficult at times for council to undertake this balancing act between people who want more development, and certainly that was one of the themes that came through, people who want less development, and then some people who appreciated the balancing act and how we're trying to do that juggle. So I've been part of this process and aware of the amount of work that's gone in, and I do support the place that we've got to, understanding that a heritage overlay on the area does not mean that a building that doesn't individually have heritage values perhaps can't be changed in ways that actually add further value to the area. So I look forward to Fairfield in the future. I think that we will see some amazing development that is in character with the area and that maintains that very precious and important village feel.
Thank you. Councillor Amir.
So what we have here, as was outlined by Councillor Rennie, is the planning scheme amendment for Fairfield Village. And in this case, as was mentioned, we are really balancing the need for heritage protection along with the need for ongoing responsiveness to for businesses and residents in the area. And it is a challenging balancing act. These two considerations, along with other things that come into play when we make planning decisions, such as access to light, such as access to housing, and sometimes there are some tensions between businesses and residents, or current businesses and residents and those who might be there in the future. So heritage is complex, and it is true that, as was mentioned, Fairfield Village isn't an area where it is sort of a time capsule of one place in time. It is quite mixed, but this idea of having the village feel and that lively sort of small town kind of vibe was something that's highly valued by people who live in Fairfield, and one of the reasons why some people choose to live there. And my understanding of the process is that is something that was very much at the core of how some of these decisions were made. I just want to say thank you to all of the officers who are involved, and also all of the residents and business owners who contributed. It has been a long process, and all of those views and ideas and perspectives have come together to then reach where we're at today.
Thank you, Councillor Amir. Councillor Greco.
I just had some questions in relation to this. First of all, in order to satisfy the residents, some of the residents' concerns, could we just get some elaboration on how the height limits were established and in terms of what's been proposed in regards to the heritage overlay?
Mr Rudd will respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Is that on?
Yes.
What there was with Fairfield, there was a heritage assessment done generally, and what the intent of the overall strategy for Fairfield was trying to do was to protect that village scale of the streetscape, and that's characterised by relatively small frontages and discrete heights. So the focus was to contain the scale at the street edge, and that's led to the controls. Now, in terms of the resolution that you're considering, what that provides anyone that's made a submission, you're effectively saying that an expert panel is going to be appointed, and there'll be an opportunity to have a fulsome consideration of any concerns through that process. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Greco.
A second question. I note also in the report that independent studies were done by heritage experts. I was just wondering whether those independent reports were also peer-reviewed.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Not in this case, no.
Supplementary, can we know the reason why they were not peer-reviewed? Given why I'm asking that, because I note that in the report that there is some resistance or some contention in relation to, residents' concerns in regards to the heritage overlay application or process, and I was just wondering, in the light of that, why peer reviews were not called for.
Yeah, right throughout the process, we've got a heritage advisor on staff, and he was quite comfortable to work with the consultants in this instance and just provide us with a level of comfort that the project was undertaking the right sort of approach. But the main emphasis was the streetscape, and less so the heritage considerations as a general comment on the outcome of the study.
Okay. Are there any other speakers to this motion? Councillor Greco?
Yeah. Look, I'd like to speak in favour, notwithstanding the questions that I've asked. I'd like to speak in favour of the motion. I think what we have to keep in mind here is that the council is putting forward a process which will be ultimately tested by an independent panel, which will be set up by the minister in regards to whether the heritage overlay suggestions that have been put forward or recommendations that have been put forward by the council should apply or not. And I think it's worthy to test that. I mean, council and in its wisdom has thought of applying these heritage overlays. And I note that within the report, from the 10 submissions that we did receive, there was a bit of division, if you like, in terms of some people not in favour for a varied range of reasons why they were not in favour of the heritage overlay, but also on the other hand there were people that were very much in favour of testing the process of applying heritage overlays, and I think that it's good for the council to actually bring this forward a further step and bring it to the attention of the minister, and so that the minister can establish an independent panel so that we can rigorously test whether heritage overlays ought to be applied to this particular area. Also, it should be noted that heritage overlays do not overly limit development. It's just a further test in relation to if there are future plans and heritage overlay were to be applied to a particular area, that it would have to meet further requirements or further criteria in terms of meeting that. And the final point that I would make is that whilst we've been sympathetic and sensitive in relation to the Fairfield Village, and I fully agree with that, I only wish that we could have been as sensitive and as sympathetic in also applying for a heritage overlay in relation to Preston Market.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Are there any further speakers? No, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried. Moving now to item 8.3, Planning Scheme Amendment C167 Showers Street Built Form Control. That is moved by Councillor Amir, seconded by Councillor Williams. Councillor Amir.
The area we're talking about today at Shower Street is a very unique part of Darebin, and I see that there are people who live in the area in the audience today, and I just want to say thank you so much for all of the hard work that you've put in over the last couple of years to, again, get where we are now. It is quite a challenging area in some ways because on one hand we have in Showers Street an environment where it's exclusively, at least when I visited last year, single level, double level, separate dwellings. It does have a very suburban feel. On the other hand, it is an area that's very close to Preston Junction, Bell Station, 2 tram lines in an area which we're expecting high development. So I know, again, we've got to a situation here where it is about finding that balance in terms of what we can do. In this case, we are quite limited by some of the state legislation, and I know it's been a long process figuring out what we can do within those restrictions. I also know that this is an area where time is really of the essence, and that there has already been some properties that have been sold and purchased, some planning proposals that are underway at the moment, and so we want to act as quickly as we can to make sure that we can get these protections in place. Again, we're limited to a certain extent by the state legislation, but I hope that at least once we can get this through, we can have those protections in place to make sure that Showers Street can stay that nice suburban street, again, that people really love to live in, and that the change we see in that area is more of the incremental type rather than big sweeping changes in the short term. And yeah, thanks again for everyone who contributed, and I hope that we've got to a place which is as good as we can get in the circumstances.
Thank you, Councillor Amir. Councillor Williams.
A few years back, Council went into a new process about planning, and Showers Street was overlooked. And we've had to virtually go back and rejig and relook and reconsult and go through that process because there was an imbalance, particularly those along living between, I guess, Plenty Road and St George's Road. It's a section there. Now, what this does is this allows the new guidelines for the amendment to go ahead and to ask the Minister to actually put this amendment and add it to the C167 to the Darebin planning scheme. Now, hopefully, we will get our Minister to actually approve this, but what we do beforehand is allowing for this to go to exhibition for 1 month, and once it's adopted, it would actually allow Showers Street's design and guidelines to give Showers Street that extra protection. I would like to say a big thank you to all the residents who have spent many years, and it's not just months, but many years of emails, coming to forums and putting in submissions to council, and also our officers have spent many, many hours. It's taken many years because we wanted to make sure that this process gets done right. We did it wrong first time and we don't want to do it wrong again. So that's why it's taken so many years, and hopefully we have got it right this time, but let's see how we go, but it'll be up for exhibition for the next month, and hopefully the Minister will approve it and it'll be put in part of the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Are there any further speakers? No. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Next item is 8.4, WH Robinson Reserve, requirements to complete pavilion works. Moved by Councillor Amir. Seconded by Councillor Reddy. Councillor.
Before we start, can I just ask a question that may help the subsequent debate? I just wanted to know, because we passed a policy in relation to tenders in regards to having 10% of that assigned to young people. I was just wondering how it applies, given that it's really an extension of a prior project, given that there's been a liquidation issue here, and whether we will be applying that 10% requirement, and if we are, where is it present?
Okay. Mr. Albertini, did you hear the question?
For you, Madam Mayor,
That's right, it's on.
My understanding is that Councillor Greco is asking us a question around the 10% compliance regarding. That's normally assessed within all our tenders, and we assess that as part of a valuation process. We do ask questions about what they do and don't provide in respect to local products, etc. So it's usually assessed in that area. So it's part of the evaluation.
If I could just ask a supplementary question. I understand that it is assessed, but how do we account for it at the outset of entering into an arrangement? I suppose from our perspective as councillors, if we are to vote on something like this, what assurances are we given at the outset that that requirement will actually be met?
Thank you for the question, through you, Chair. With regard to the re-tender process and going through that, so we'll undertake the due diligence. We do re-evaluate the criteria. We go through the whole process again. It's very much processed through a risk lens. So I can assure Council that there is a rigorous risk process applied to this, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, we'll now move to Councillor Amir. Would you like to speak to the motion?
I feel sad that I missed speaking on the really fun, exciting one at the start of the meeting, and I have to be the one saying, here's something that's not quite exactly what we wanted, but we're doing it anyway. So this is quite an unfortunate situation where the pavilion at W.H. Robinson Reserve, people in the area will know it's been partly constructed. The firm has gone into liquidation, and so what we're doing here is putting a process in place to get back on track, so that hopefully the pavilion can be completed as soon as possible. There's two different clubs that have been using the pavilion, the Druids and the Women's Sports Club. So my understanding is that the Druids will be able to continue to use the pavilion over summer, and others have been relocated to other areas. I know, again, this is something that's been in the works for a really long time, and is an area where we've got new people moving in, we've got more and more people playing sport in that area, and so I look forward to seeing this completed as soon as possible.
Thank you. Councillor Rennie.
Yes, as Councillor Amir has said, it is disappointing for our community, indeed for council staff, for pretty much everyone when this kind of situation arises. But things do happen, and unfortunately sometimes they're not preventable. I know from speaking to some of the sports clubs that have been impacted that they have had high praise for council officers who have bent over to make sure that they are accommodated, that they can continue training at night in a context where they don't have the lighting on their sports field. And so I think that leaves us now in a situation where we simply have to go through the steps to ensure that the work does get completed. That's what this item on the agenda is about. I know that the sports clubs are really keen to see the pavilion completed. It is likely to take longer, and they accept that, and I think that the way in which council officers, and I take my hat off to you, have managed this has been really important in that being accepted by the community.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Williams.
It is unfortunate that a business has gone into liquidation. This happens on a daily basis, and it's been totally out of council's control. Although we're in this situation where council's now left holding the baby, and we now have to just pull together and go to tender, and hopefully we'll find somebody who would be more reputable, possibly maybe somebody who works, lives or plays in the area and has maybe a long history, who's a good builder. And we can get those sporting clubs that can have a fully functional, fitting pavilion and area that they can continue playing their ongoing sport that seems to be growing on a daily basis.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried. Next item is 8.5, CT 2017-239, provision of fire, mechanical and electrical maintenance services.
Happy to move.
Councillor Newton, would you like, so the recommendation has a few blanks that need to be filled in, so would you like to read those out?
Yes, thank you. So I'll be moving the motion with the blanks filled in. So we are wanting to move that council enters into a contract with AG Coombs for the supply of fire maintenance services. And the next blank we'll be filling in is the lump sum of $47,217 for year one. The next blank, number 2, is again enters into a contract with AG Coombs for supply of mechanical maintenance services, with filling in the lump sum of $123,732 for year one. And then in number 3, we're filling in entering a contract with AG Coombs for supply of electrical maintenance services, and we've got for the lump sum of $47,563 for year one. Is that, yep. Thank you.
So that is it up on the screen? Yep.
Yes, as up on the screen.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? Councillor Remy, Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Melissa. So this is about tendering for suppliers for the supply of our fire, mechanical and electrical maintenance services. This is very important just to point people to the agenda. This is super important because we have 1,370 items of mechanical equipment, 12,000 items of electrical equipment and 3,600 emergency and exit lights, as well as 2,000 items of fire systems equipment over 261 structures within the municipality. Hence, we absolutely need to maintain those to make sure that we're safe, and that's why we are putting this forward tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Remy.
This is the kind of contract where people might not necessarily give it a lot of thought unless something goes wrong, which is exactly why we're doing this right now, to manage our risks, to make good decisions, to maintain our equipment, to reduce any possible risk to staff and residents in Darebin, and I'm glad to get this done.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? No? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Item 8.6 is CT 2017-263 Marylands Community Centre East Building alterations.
I'm happy to move that.
It's moved by Councillor Greco and seconded by Councillor Newton. Councillor Greco.
I'm happy to move it with the following.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Filling in the following blanks as we've done with the previous motion. In relation to point number 1 is after, in the first blank spot there, is to award the contract to AA Turner Proprietary Limited, and also the next for the amount of $628,969. It's in relation to point number 1. In relation to point number 2 is the amount is $94,345.35. And I think that covers all the blank spots.
Yep. So seconded by Councillor Newton. Councillor Greco.
Yeah, look, again, this is one of our routine contracts that we enter into in relation to the various facilities and buildings that we have in our city. And in this one particularly, given that we're talking about the Marylands Community Centre, I think it's a worthwhile expense that we're entering into, because it's a centre that is widely used by the community. In that particular area, the Marylands Community Centre, in where it's located, there aren't that many services around in that area, so it's a bit of a desert in relation to community services. So we really have to maintain the upkeep of that centre. As I said, it's widely used from a cross-section of people, both from young people to there's a lot of elderly citizens clubs that meet there. But most importantly, the centre has become a strong training and schooling place where it provides great opportunities for people who somewhere along the line have missed out on getting an ordinary education, and the Marylands Community Centre actually assists a lot of young people in catching up in terms of getting themselves some educational qualifications. And also on that note, council's also, beyond the amount in relation to maintaining the place, has also contributed quite significantly in building spaces and classrooms in order to extend that learning experience for a lot of young people that are disadvantaged in that area. So I think it's money well spent, and I really think that this particular centre, we really have to keep a watchful eye on it and make sure that it's of top-notch quality in terms of the facilities that are available there.
Thank you. Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Melissa. I'd really echo what Councillor Greco said. Praise Marylands is an incredibly important part of the community up in Keon Park. Students come there not only from Darebin but also from Whittlesea and around. It's also used extensively by senior citizens clubs, and I think the work that's being done about accessibility upgrades, accessible toilet upgrades and renewal works is going to be really, really important. Praise can kind of burst at the seams a little bit because there's such good work being done there. The staff are really, really excellent and really care about their students. So I think anything that we can do at Praise is really important. It was wonderful to be at the launch of their new building a few months ago with the Mayor, Councillor McCarthy and Councillor Greco. So yeah, anything we can do, I'm very happy to see this going ahead.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? No, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Okay, the next item 9, consideration of responses to petitions, notices of motion and general business. 9.1, petition response for drainage in Andrew Street, Northcote. There's an alternative officer recommendation to that which was in the agenda, so that's up on the screen. I think it was circulated as well via email. And Councillor Rennie is happy to move that. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Newton. Councillor Rennie.
Thank you. This relates to the matter that we accepted, the petition that we accepted earlier in the agenda, and obviously does highlight that sometimes process doesn't go quite as it should, and we're doing things a bit roundabout and back to front. But the petition has now been accepted, and in fact a report has already been produced. And what the report highlighted is that at this point in time it wouldn't be suitable to undertake drainage upgrade in that area, and therefore we will write to the petitioners and advise that there are no current plans for the drainage upgrade works in Andrew Street. However, I know from reading the report the council officers gave that careful consideration, and I thank all of those people who signed the petition and organised that petition for highlighting this issue and drawing our attention to the fact that this particular street doesn't have drainage, which obviously the council was aware of. In terms of the decision not to upgrade at this point in time, it's important to note that there are a number of areas within the Darebin municipality where drainage is not perfect, and in fact this is by no means one of the worst instances of that. The water does drain away in this area even though there aren't drains, and the road surface on this road at the moment is particularly good, and the time to undertake major drainage works is when the road is being redone. So this is an issue that would be revisited at some stage in the future when the road is being redone. That is a sensible time to look at these type of things, because cutting up a road and placing drains in a street which has a great road surface costs an enormous amount of money and probably isn't the best investment in improving drainage works in Darebin at this point in time. That's not to say that at some point in the future, when the road is being re-looked at, that we wouldn't reconsider that position.
Thank you. Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Melissa. Just briefly, I support this petition, and that I do appreciate the officers have brought in number 2. We are always working to improve what we do, and I'm very happy to see that on there. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I've got a slight amendment to the recommendation that's there, and I hope that the mover and the seconder would accommodate it. And I'll read out the amendment, and just following on from the last word there, the following words, and be referred to the mid-year budget review process and the 2019-2020 budget process for consideration.
Councillor Rennie, are you happy to accept that?
I'm happy for it to be reviewed.
Pardon?
Happy for it to be sent to the budget process.
Happy to accept.
Happy to accept those words. Okay, we'll incorporate that into the substantive motion. Can we have those words to put into the minutes, please? Are there any further speakers? No? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Item 10, notices of motion. 10.1, school student involvement in local democratic processes. Councillor Rennie moves motion as... and that's seconded by Councillor Amir. Councillor Rennie.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor Lasserf. This is a motion that would require council to do things a bit differently, but I believe do things a bit differently in the interests of participation in our democratic processes. So the motion is that we would essentially hold 3 council meetings each year during school hours. They would, of course, be open to all community members, but we would particularly invite school students to come along and participate. We hold our meetings typically in the evening, and we would continue to hold most of our meetings in the evening. But I think that for every person who attends in the evening, there may be others who are not able to attend, and in particular school students. And I think that there is enormous value in making sure that primary school students and secondary school students in Darebin are familiar with the work and the processes of council, and that they have an opportunity to come and participate. I can envisage a situation where we might ask, for example, the junior school councils, the kids who have been elected to leadership positions within their council, or the student representative council members within their school to come along to participate, to think about the questions they'd like to ask us, to listen to the debates that we have. I think that could be incredibly informative for them, but also for us, because this is the generation that are going to hopefully live in Darebin for many years to come, that are hopefully going to stand for council in the future, that are certainly going to be voting for council. And I think the more we can do to engage them in council processes, to make them excited about the work that we do, about the possibilities within local government, and about the real and meaningful decisions that we make and how those decisions impact on their lives and the amenity of their neighbourhoods and streets, the more work we do like that, the better. I'd also note that there may be other members of our community who aren't able to attend evening meetings because they don't have transport, because they don't want to come out at night time, and that this would also provide an opportunity for those people to come and to participate in our council meetings. So I hope that you will all support this. I really look forward potentially to being in this space or another space where we might have a chamber full of people who don't typically participate, coming along, asking us questions, listening to us, challenging us, and that we might all learn from each other.
Thank you. Councillor Amir.
In the last couple of months, I've visited a couple of schools. I went to visit the Bell Primary students, the grade 4s, with Councillor Messina, and also spoke to the Year 11 students at Our Lady of Mercy College a couple of weeks ago. And one thing that really struck me is the passion that these young people had and the commitment that they had to making the world a better place. And it was really exciting to be in a class with 100 9-year-olds who were all bursting to tell us about what they were going to do to clean up the creek, to improve gender equality, to help solve food insecurity, whatever it was, in the local area. And I think it would be very exciting, as Councillor Rennie had raised, to harness that energy. I think there's a lot of young people who, you know, the reason they don't come along, sometimes we might see students in the audience accompanying their parents. Other than that, it's pretty rare. I'm 33 and I almost never see anyone in the audience who's younger than me. And the reason for that, I think, is partly because young people don't necessarily know about local government, local council. They wouldn't necessarily know that the role that we play. And the second reason, I think, is that there's a misconception in the community that council exists only for ratepayers, and people think, even young people in their teens or in their 20s think, well, that doesn't apply to me because I don't have a house, I'm not going to be able to afford a house, so there's not much point in me paying attention. And I think we can absolutely expand that out to show these young people that we are there for them, we are interested in their ideas, and hopefully inspire them too to get more involved and have their voices heard and be running for council in the future. Am I running out of time? I can't see.
15 seconds.
15 seconds. In terms of holding the meetings during the day, it will be more challenging for those residents and councillors that work full-time, but also noting that for people with little kids, many of us councillors here tonight have other people looking after our children, and so it will be good to be able to value that parenting role as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Amir. Any further speakers? Councillor Greco.
Yeah, I'd like to say a few words. Look, I think this is a great initiative if the council can actually do this, and I think it would actually provide that sort of civic education that we need to sort of instill from a very young age in our community. I also believe, from my little experience here on the council and some of the interaction that we've had with schools, that there is a great appetite out there by young people to learn more about the council. And I'll also say that they know more about council than what we actually think that they actually know. And a lot of young people, their interaction with council is usually through sporting facilities, football grounds, soccer grounds, and things like that. But I've been pleasantly surprised when I've gone to schools, the range of issues that young people talk about, and also about council's involvement in those issues. And I think an initiative like this takes us to the next step, because we have students coming to council, and we've had mock council meetings with them where the mayor's been involved with them. We dress them up in the mayoral robes and all those sort of things. We have mock debates and stuff like that. But I think actually going to the schools will give it a whole different dimension, not only for the students, but I think we will learn a lot in relation to how we present ourselves and how we actually debate and discuss ideas in relation to an audience such as young people, and obviously there'll be many of their parents there and the teaching community. So I really look forward to this initiative. And the final thing that I would say is that councils are often seen as fairly stuffy organisations. I always equate a council with a magistrate's court. When you think of a magistrate's court, sometimes you think of a local council. And I reckon that doing something like this, going into schools, will just help to shatter that image of what a council actually does and the diversity of the work that we do in the community.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. I think Councillor Williams.
I think this is a great way of engaging our community, which I find is a way that will tap into areas and places that we don't do. Obviously, elderly people who don't like to come here, they feel unsafe at night time. Obviously, children love to come to go on excursion. I'm sure they'd love to see it from a visual perspective. You see things on television, like I remember the old days of seeing a television show, but actually seeing it, the progress and how it all gets put together, sort of changes the way you actually see the program the next time. And I think it's important that this is our next generation, and getting them involved of what it actually means to be a councillor. Maybe one day it might inspire one of them to be a councillor. I think it's also some of our great ideas, changes and improvements actually come from our next generation. And you never know, we might get some wonderful public questions. We might be here for a long time, so I'm sure that they'll come up with some really beauties. But nevertheless, I think that would be fantastic for us as councillors to be here and open for them, but most of all to show them that who we are. Majority of people in our population in Darebin, they don't even know who we are. And I think that's really sad. I'd have to admit, going back some years ago, I didn't know who cancer was and councillors were either, until I actually got involved in a development that I was objecting to. And it's changed me as a person, because look who I am now, a councillor. And I think it's great. You need to teach the young generation. Knowledge is important, and it's actually empowering. And we need to empower our next generation, and I think this would be a great way of doing it.
Thank you. Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Minister. So I wanted to commend Councillor Rennie for bringing this initiative to us. So for me, I remember going to Canberra in Year 6, going to Parliament and learning about governance and at least having some idea of what they do there. But probably even 10 years ago, I couldn't have told you what a council does, apart from maybe that the mayor does speeches and opens things. And I used to cuts the ribbons, yeah. And I used to work at Northcote Library about 10 years ago, and I never gave a thought to council or what council does. I just worked at the library. Sorry, everyone. Sorry, Sue. And it was only when I worked in communications at the City of Boroondara that I got to know what council is working on, what a mayor does, what councillors do. And now, you know, a few years later, I'm on council and it's the best job that I've ever had. So I really think that exposing young people to what council does is really important to break down the barriers about, you know, what people do inside these buildings. And I really noticed it last year we had a thing called the Speak Youth Program, which had a lot of Somali and African youth. They came into the council chamber, got to know some of us, and I think just showing that this place is something where all members of our community can be is incredibly important, particularly with the racism that's happening in the lead up to the state election around fictitious African gangs, etc. So I think anything that we can do that welcomes and encourages young people to come to council is really important.
Thank you. I think everyone has spoken, so I'll put that to the vote. No, it has to be done before we start the debate. I'm sorry. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Our next item is item 11, reports of standing committees. There are none. Item 12, records of assemblies of councillors. 12.1, assemblies of councillors held. Moved by Councillor Amir, seconded by Councillor Rennie. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Item 13 is reports by Mayor and councillors. Now that should be in front of you. Can I just make one small change? I made an error on mine. That last line should be leave of absence 29th of June to the 7th of July inclusive. Okay, so that's moved by Councillor Rennie, seconded by Councillor Williams. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Item 14, consideration of reports considered confidential. Councillor Rennie.
I move that we move into camera.
Okay, that's moved by Councillor Rennie, seconded by Councillor Newton. All those in favour? That motion is carried. So the council has resolved to move now to consider confidential items. So we'll be asking people to clear the chamber. Thank you.
Christmas lights fill the city. There are people everywhere. The snow is falling white and pretty as I stroll on my way to you. How would you feel about packing up today? Leave this all behind. Go get snowed in somewhere. snowed in. Let's go get snowed in. How wrong could that be? Being snowed in somewhere, you and me. Let's get snowed in somewhere.
confidential items. None of them resolved to be made public, so they're all remain.
Return them.
Like them all back, my pleasure.
Yeah. Go on here.
Like half a tree, yeah.
Yeah.